as always, everyone's sitting way back. Thank you all for coming out on this winter night to participate in the class of 2021's Junior College Night. For those of you who I've yet to meet, I'm Sarah Gleason Ross, the Director of College Counseling, and I am joined this evening by my fabulous colleagues, Justin Baker, Matthew Herman, and Anna Follingsby. And the newest addition to our team, Avante Jones in the back. So Ms. Jones joined us last summer as the admin in our office, and I guess you've already had a chance to meet her because you know that she is sure to put a smile on your face. So together, we look forward to supporting you, guiding you, and encouraging you on this next stage of your academic journey. This is a grand partnership between you and Gilman School, your college counselor, your parents, and all who love and support you. And tonight, you will learn that college admissions officers are also an important part of this collaborative relationship. We depend greatly upon one another, and we all join forces to help you to find the best possible match for your educational future. So, before we start the formal part of this program, I ask you to please consider this. You attend one of the finest schools in the nation and have received an education second to none. You can clap for that. Over the next few months, when you fully engage in this process, you are certain to discover a number of colleges and universities which will be excellent fits for you academically, socially, artistically, geographically, and philosophically. We do worry about the many ways stress and anxiety tends to invade this process. So what can you do to manage the inevitable worry that comes as you peer into the unknown? Control that which you can control. This is the best advice that I have ever received when it comes to managing anxiety. And what can you control? Follow the steps we provide you at each point along the way. Avoid hearsay. Meet with your counselor regularly. Read our newsletters. Follow our timeline. Study our handbook. Subscribe to our Facebook and Instagram accounts. Delve into college research. Build a balanced college list, one which is true to your interests, your talents, and goals, and all is certain to end well. And tonight we will focus on best practices, the hows of a college application. But before we start, don't forget to ask the why. Why are you going to college? What do you want to study? What kind of environment is the best learning environment for you? Colleges seek scholars first and foremost, and college admission officers will surely be asking you, why college? Why this college? And finally, they say that gratitude is the great antidote to worry. Never lose sight of this fact. How fortunate are we to be here at Gilman School, one of the best schools in this country, and dare I say, the world. How lucky to have this opportunity. We must not lose sight of our privilege and the joy that comes with learning, as well as the many possibilities and worlds it opens to us. So that said, I'm extremely privileged to introduce our stellar panel of admissions professionals who join us this evening to share their wisdom and expertise. I'll start with Steph Gonzalez right here. She serves as the Associate Director for Diversity Recruitment at Williams College. She previously worked in student affairs and admission at Boston University, where she earned her bachelor degree, her MED, and MBA. And she's currently pursuing a PhD in education at the George Washington University and is currently working on research with the DC Public Schools Study Abroad programs. Kevin Mathis on the far right is the Dean of Admission at Bucknell University, as well as a 2007 graduate. He obtained a master's degree in college student personnel from Ohio University before starting his admissions career at St. Lawrence University from 2009 to 13. Kevin then worked at Dartmouth College for 4 years before returning to his alma mater, Bucknell, in 2017. Kevin also serves on the board of directors for the Coalition application. And finally, in the center, we are lucky to have Shannon Gundy, who is the Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Maryland in College Park. where she began as an admission counselor in 1990. She currently oversees freshman and transfer recruitment, admission and enrollment, living and learning and special program admission, merit scholarship review and selection, undergraduate international student admission and enrollment, and marketing and strategic communications for enrollment management. She is a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C. She began her career in college admissions not far from here as an admission counselor at the College of Notre Dame of Maryland. Committed to issues of access in college admission, Shannon is particularly interested in serving traditionally underrepresented students as they work to pursue higher education. She, like Nelson Mandela, believes that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So with that inspiring quote, I turn the mic over to my colleague, Matt Herman, who will serve as our MC for the evening.
Mr. Mathis, Ms. Gundy, Ms. Gonzalez, thank you again for sharing your time and expertise with us this evening. To get our conversation going, would you please introduce your school and then let us know what you think the appropriate role of the parent is in the college process. Ms. Gonzalez, would you like to start?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Although juniors, I understand you didn't have much of a choice in the matter. I currently work at Williams College, which is a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, one of the oldest liberal arts colleges in the country. We have about 2,200 undergraduate students on our campus. And my favorite thing about Williams, which I'll end it with that, is that our favorite class style at Williams is called a tutorial. It is modeled off of the Oxford style of teaching and is a class that is taught with just 2 students and 1 faculty member. So if you really like the idea of engaging deeply in an intellectual conversation with 1 peer and a professor, Williams might be a good fit. Parents in the process, sure. The role of the parent, I believe, you'll hear this said a lot in this process, is to support the student, but it's the student's process, right? They are the ones that are going off to college, and so your role is to be there as their guide, their mentor, to have conversations, to be there when things get tough, but really to let them navigate and steer the ship, if you will. There's a lovely sort of expression that the student is the driver in the car and the parents are the passengers for the first time. It's like a go-to line in admissions, I feel like. And it's very much true, right? The student should be the one driving this car, should be saying, this is what I'm thinking about in my college process, this is what matters to me, this is what's important to me. And parents should be there to say, okay, let's talk about how that might pan out over the course of your 4 years.
Hi everyone, as you know, Shannon Gundy from your flagship university, University of Maryland, College Park. University of Maryland, College Park is a large land-grant university. I think the things that are important to know about the university, especially for those of you who may not have experienced the University of Maryland over the past few years, or those of you who graduated and haven't been back to see your alma mater, the University of Maryland is an amazing place. And the opportunities that are afforded to students, I think, are phenomenal and unmatched by most institutions throughout the state of Maryland. And if you have not had an opportunity to come to see the breadth of opportunities that are available to students from all across the state and all across the country and around the world even, then I strongly encourage you to come to see the university and experience all that we have to offer. My perception of how parents should play a role in the college admission process, I admit has changed since I was a parent of a student going through the college admission process. And I thought, when my daughter started going through the college application process, I was like, this is what I do, we've got this, this is easy. It was not easy. And the thing that was difficult and challenging was to follow the advice that I give to parents, which is to kind of step back and let your child drive the process. I have a daughter who is smart, who's engaged, who follows directions and does what she's supposed to do, but it was still difficult. The way that I found that it was best to navigate the process was just talking, managing the process through communication, letting her know that she could come to me and share her concerns, her fears, and anxieties, as well as for me doing that and letting her know, okay, I know that this is yours, but it's hard. It's hard for me to let go, and letting her sort of help me navigate the space as well. So my advice is to have lots of conversations. It's not the time for you to be completely hands-off. You know, just because it's the college application process doesn't mean that your student all of a sudden has flipped the switch from high school student to college student yet. So you are certainly invited to be a part of the process, but we encourage you to be an appropriate part of the process and begin to let your student navigate the path for themselves.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Mathis from Bucknell University. We're about 2.5 hours north of here. And I would say, just to talk a little bit about Bucknell, we're a primarily undergraduate-focused institution, about 3,600 to 700 students, only about 50 graduate students. I would say one of the things that makes Bucknell a little different in terms of smaller schools is that we actually do have 3 distinct colleges. So we actually mirror some larger schools because of their multiple college system. So even though Bucknell is a smaller school, we have a College of Arts and Sciences, College of Engineering, and the Freeman College of Management. So I think that's something to keep in mind because we do have students to apply by college, which is, again, I think something that's a little bit different for a small school if you have to decide that way. And then I always like to end with a fun fact. Fun fact about Bucknell: we have the oldest undergraduate animal behavior program in the country, and we also have a primate lab on campus. There are 4 different species of primates that live on our campus that our students get to observe for that program. Which I think is pretty good. In terms of what families can do to, what their role is in the process, I think I'm going to echo my colleagues with support. I think that you know your student better than any of us do, so I always recommend help them navigate this process. When we talk about driving or taking ownership, what does that mean for your student? It could be something as simple as encouraging them to check in for their visit when you go visit a college. I think that is something that for some students is a big step. Others, it's giving them more control than that. The other thing that I would say that I always talk about is we all know Gilman, and we know you're a high-achieving school. We know the types of colleges that you're looking at. And I think that one of the things that can happen at this stage in a student's life is it can be the first time that they face some adversity and that they might not get the outcome they're looking for. So when I think about what your role is as a family, is it's to support your student through that process, and that's to celebrate the great things, but to help them move on if things don't work out. And you can be angry and frustrated with them, but help them see the bigger picture. And this is that moment where I say, you as an adult have lived more life than they have, and you know the things that are to come. And that there are bigger things on the horizon, and that this moment in time, even if it might be disappointing, help them steer the ship to realize that this might be a little blip in their life, but there are other things that will happen decades after college that are really, really important and special.
Great, thank you. And now, starting with Ms. Gundy, can you share with us some of the ways that college admissions has changed in the last 10 or 20 years?
You asked that because I've been here for a long time. The thing that immediately comes to mind is the amount of stress and anxiety that is in this process is obscene. It's ridiculous that people are losing sleep over a process that really is not designed to be as complicated as it has become. The thing that I encourage you to do is to be as realistic as you possibly can. You've got amazing resources here. I don't know if you realize how lucky you are to have the kind of college counseling support that you have at a place like Gilman. Take advantage of that. Listen to the advice that's being given to you and do everything you can to kind of ratchet down the anxiety. Parents have a tendency sometimes to be as anxious as the student. You have to let that go. You have to realize that it's going to work out the way it's supposed to work out, and even though you may not get the immediate decision that you thought you were going to get or that you wanted to get, it's going to be fine. You're going to go to college. You're going to end up someplace where you're doing great things and having a really good experience. It's going to be fine. The other thing that I think is different about the process now is the things that contribute to the amount of anxiety in the process, like all of the rankings, and we're guilty. We as colleges and universities are guilty of touting the rankings when they work in our favor. and then encouraging you not to use them to make your college decisions. But you kind of have to find your way through the information that's out there, but use reliable sources for the information. I hate College Confidential. It's wrong. The information that you find on sites like that does absolutely nothing to clear the path or provide information for you. Use the resources that you have and take advantage of that. The level of competitiveness in the process has grown. It has evolved over time because schools and universities are trying to make sure that they're filling their classes with the students that they're being charged with enrolling. And the anxiety and frenzy on the part of students and families, I think, is contributing to that. But the reality is that what you're getting here is preparing you to be successful. Because you know you've got a good education, you're going to be the right fit for the right place. And whatever you can do to help make your mind understand right now before you've got all of the irons in the fire, really start to understand that where you land is going to be a good place, and do what you can to sort of take the anxiety out of the process.
And then Ms. Gonzalez, can you share a little bit about some of the ways that you've seen colleges change in the last 10 or so years?
Sure, yeah. So I'll just actually take that point and follow along. In terms of the anxiety, I think one of the pieces that you've seen sort of shift as well is that when I was first going to college, there was some social media, but there wasn't the level of social media that there is now. And so just the comparisons that you can make between you and your peers are really different than maybe they were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It's really easy to get lost in the shuffle and feel like, oh my gosh, all of my friends are going off to all of their top choices and I didn't get into mine, or I don't know where I want to go, or I don't know what I want to do yet. And so I'd say a word of caution as a family is to decide how much about your specific college search process you want to share and with who. Who do you want to let into that bubble, right? Maybe it's your best friend, but maybe it's not all 10 of your best friends. Maybe it's that you are comfortable sharing with certain family members, but not everybody at the Thanksgiving table. So those are just some things that I think will continue to creep up over the course of the next year or so that you're going through this search process. And I would encourage you to not necessarily draw comparisons between yourself and your peers. Everybody's going through their own individual pathway. You can't really draw comparisons in that same way.
Mr. Mathis, anything to add?
I would just say, I think the other thing that's happened fairly quickly in probably the last 20 years is the globalization of higher ed. When you look at colleges and universities today, it went from being regional to trying to be drawing students more nationally, and then it became overseas and other countries. So I think that's something else that has rapidly changed. And part of it is also around technology, and I think the reason we also respond and want to enroll students from all over the globe is because we know the world that you're entering after graduation is a global society. And we're trying to be a microcosm of the globe on our college campus, so you're prepared to face all different types of people and backgrounds and resources when you get into the real world yourself. So I think, as I've looked at what's happened, I think we've all tried to move pretty quickly on some of those things to make sure that we're actually preparing our students for the future. Whereas in maybe 20, 30 years ago, it was fine to just, at Bucknell, get most of your students from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. Not a big deal. But now we think our students don't just want to stay where they're from, they want to go everywhere, and we need to make sure we're representing that on our campus.
Great, thank you. So now moving on to the college search. So according to the U.S. Department of Education, there are nearly 4,700 degree-granting institutions in the United States. What are the best ways to get to know a college? Mr. Mathis, can you start off and share some of the ways an applicant can get to know a school? What should he be looking for? What are some of the good questions to ask? And how does one make the best use of the campus visit?
Sure, there's a lot to go off of there. What I always start with is, I think as you embark on this process, you as students as well as you as families, but particularly the student, is to take a moment to reflect on who you are and what you enjoy. So I think one of the easiest things to do is to take a minute to think about your experience here at Gilman, and to think about what are the aspects of this community and this education that you like, what do you not like, and then how do you find those things in your college. So it could be, if you like the intimate size of Gilman, maybe you're trying to replicate that at another college. I think size is a relative term because, you know, some folks think that Bucknell's a small school, but, you know, when a graduating class is 100 students, we're 10 times the size of that as a first-year class. So actually, yes, we're small, but it could feel really big to some students. And other students come from schools that graduate just as many high school seniors as we do in a graduating class, and there's some dynamics there. So it could be as simple as size, but it's also about thinking about the educational mission and what you've experienced here. I think that's always a good place to start. And then, you know, one of the other pieces of advice I always give is that if you don't know where to start, you can always check out a college or university that's local, something that's not too far away, just to get a feel for a college. And to say, you know, after that first visit, this is what I like and this is what I don't like, because then that gives you something to go off of. That you can connect with your college counselors and say, I really liked, I'm just going to pick on Maryland for a second, but I really liked this aspect of UMaryland, but I'm still not sure if it's exactly what I want to be. Do you know schools that have that kind of part of their community or ethos that I can be looking at other schools? Because it can give you a jumping off point. When I think about good questions to ask, I think you want to be asking questions about the admissions process in terms of, I think, particularly early programs, early decision, early action. What % of the class are you taking through those programs? Because those can highlight some statistical differences that can help you navigate how to approach the application process, you know, in the upcoming year. I also think about things like financial aid. As you as a family think about financing higher education, I also think it's really important to be honest with yourselves about what you're willing to contribute to a college education, and then what that means for your students. So if you know you won't qualify for need-based financially, but you want some sort of financial aid possible, you need to be having discussions about expectations for merit scholarships and what schools those might be. And that's something you can ask at colleges, because we all vary in terms of, do we offer merit aid? Is it only need-based aid? Is it a combination of both? If it is a combination, does it skew majority need-based, or does it skew merit-based? I mean, these are things that there are nuances to colleges, and getting those answers can be really helpful. And then making the best use of your campus visit. Research your options when you visit a school, because we all have a lot of different ways to visit. I can guarantee you that every college will have a campus tour and some sort of information session, or maybe if it's a small place like my first job, we only did interviews because we were so tiny and had so few visitors that it just made sense to connect individually. But the thing I think about when you make good use of your campus visit is, beyond the general stuff, see if there's any specialization. So is there a way to tailor the day to yourself? Can you shadow a student, or kind of pretend to be a student on your own for the day and actually go to classes and meet with faculty and talk to students over lunch? That can be a great way to understand if you feel like you're fitting in with the culture of the institution that you're experiencing. Are there open house programs, or maybe you want to go to a big visit program where there's 300 or 500 people on campus and you know, are all doing the same type of thing. And then when you're actually on campus, one of the interesting things that I don't see happen very much, but I think can be really effective, is, as a family, don't be afraid to separate. I think, you know, we usually have multiple tour guide options. So you as a family don't all have to pick the same tour guide. And I will hazard a guess that all of us as their tour guides will tell you, we pretty much give the same tour. So pick the person who you feel like you connect with the most. But I think, again, it allows you to maybe form your own opinions, because that way the student can go with one guide, the family can go with another, and then you can come together. You can compare notes on what guide said, what did you like, what did you not like. It can give you some different perspective. And then the other piece of the campus visit is to not be afraid to spend a little time on your own and just stop random people. As much as we train our tour guides and tell them to be honest, I'm a realist where there's a degree of distrust that we are telling them what to tell you. And if you want the real deal, maybe it's talking to that random student that's sitting on the quad or is sitting at lunch and you happen to be near them. A lot of our students are happy to talk to you even if they don't work for our office, and a lot of them are happy to tell you how they feel about our institutions. So don't be afraid to connect with those people and to buffer your time on a campus to allow some of that to happen. Because I also know that you can schedule visits where you just need to hit it and then leave and go to the next visit. But have some extra time to do your own roaming, and maybe even check out the town that the college is in, so you can see, what is the downtown like? What is the community like around the institution? Because those are things that do affect your experience over 4 years. There's a lot.
Great suggestions. Ms. Gundy, do you have any other suggestions?
Two things. One, as you are beginning the college search process, expand your horizons. Don't limit your search to schools that you've heard of before. There are over 4,000 schools, as you heard when we got started this evening, and there are a lot of them that would be a good place for you to go. Make sure that you're considering, you can't consider all 4,000, which is perfectly fine, but make sure that you're not restricting yourself to just the schools that you already know about. The other thing is, in addition, I think it's great advice to talk to other students on campus, just to walk up and talk to random students, but I also think that you need to make sure that you are including an official admissions office conversation. We have information that we can share with you and impart to you that students across the campus can't. I think you need to have a mixture of both of those things to have a really beneficial experience.
Yeah, no, I think they summed up most of it. The only thing I would just sort of go back to the point about slowing down your visit. It's really easy, especially if you are going to venture out of Baltimore and out of Maryland, to say we have to squeeze in as many schools as we possibly can while we're in Massachusetts, or while we're taking on that West Coast trip out to California, and slow that down a little bit. Maybe only do 2 schools in a day. You'll remember more, and then you'll be able to come back to your college counseling team and say, these are the things that I liked about this place. What are other schools that I might be able to check out later on down the line?
Great. So imagine now that you've visited a handful of schools and the students are ready to submit your application. Can you all share with us how that admissions decision is made? First, Ms. Gundy, will you please discuss the role of the transcript, and then we'll talk about testing, essays, and recommendations.
One of the things that I think is most important to know about the consideration of the transcript is that it's the consideration of the transcript and not just the consideration of the GPA. I think there is a misunderstanding that when we're reviewing students for admission, even at a school the size of the University of Maryland, that one number that represents the grade point average is not the determining factor of whether you're going to be offered admission to our schools. Most of us, and I think if you talk to admission folks across the globe, you'll hear a lot of people talk about holistic admission. And you may not understand exactly what that means. For us at the University of Maryland, for those who employ a full holistic application review, that means actually reading the transcript. It doesn't just mean looking at that one number that is the grade point average. We're going to read each individual course. We're going to look to see the level of difficulty of the course and then how you performed in that course. We'll look at trends in your grades. We'll look to see if you might have had a rocky start, but did you improve? What was the reason that you may have had that bumpy start, and how did you gain your footing and move on from there? We also want to look, context is exceptionally important in this process. What opportunities did you have in your school, and how did you choose to take advantage of them? If you are enrolled in a school that has good opportunities for you to challenge yourself academically, we expect you to challenge yourself academically where appropriate. If you are a student and you are really, really strong in math, but English is not your favorite subject, it's not the subject that you excel in, we don't expect that you're going to take the most competitive courses in English, but we are going to expect that you do that in math, if that's where you excel. We're looking for students who push themselves appropriately within the opportunities that they have in their school and with their own abilities. And we're looking at all of that information. We look to see how you compare to other students in your school when we have that information available. We realize that your school isn't going to rank you against one another, but we do want to know from your counselor how you've chosen to take advantage of the curriculum that's available to you. I think that the bottom line and the most important thing to know about the transcript is that we are fully considering everything that we can on the transcript. We're not just looking at that one number. I have lots of conversations with families who want to know how we calculate the grade point average and whether we're adding additional weight, or are we taking away weight, and are we adding weight to the courses. That's not significant. What we're doing is actually reading the transcript and trying to learn as much about you and how you performed in high school as we possibly can through that information.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Mathis, can you please discuss how your school uses the SAT and the ACT, and also explain your new test optional policy?
Sure. So I'll just start by jumping on a point Jen was making about the transcript, which is that I just want you to know that a lot of our schools don't just have a cutoff where it's saying we'll only take this number from Gilman, or it has to be this kind of rigor of curriculum and grade point average and above. You know, for a lot of us, it's about who applies each year, and you know, for me, I mean, I want to say my first year back at Bucknell, I think we took 10 of you from Gilman in my first year. I mean, we took a lot, and then the next year we didn't have as many applicants, so of course we just didn't take as many because we didn't have the strength that's there. So each year is different, and I think that's important, but to know that there isn't some magic number that we will only do this from each school. Now, in terms of testing, I've worked at, my first job was at a test optional school. My second job was at a school that required the highest testing requirements in the country, I think. And now I'm back to kind of in the middle, and we just went test optional this past year at Bucknell. So first and foremost, thinking about a test optional policy, you have the option at Bucknell and at over 1,000 other institutions to decide if you would like your SAT or ACT score considered in our admission process. If you don't submit an SAT or ACT, we essentially just use the rest of the application to make our decision. Now, what you have to watch out for at different schools is what their test optional policy means. So at Bucknell, ours is you just don't submit a score and that's it. At other places, they might ask you for an extra essay or some sort of supplemental information. Some schools will do a test flexible, where instead of an SAT or ACT, it might be you can submit AP scores or SAT subject tests. So you need to watch different policies that are out there. The other thing I'll caution you on is if you are seeking merit-based scholarships at test optional schools, you have to watch out for how their policies operate. So again, I'll use Bucknell as an example. If you go test optional, you are still eligible for all of our merit scholarships. At other schools, they will say, if you want to be considered for this merit award, you need to submit a test score to be considered for it. So you have to watch for the nuances of testing policies. Now, if you do want to submit your test scores, I think what's important to know is, just like Shannon said, it's context. I think, again, we get fixated on one number, but the way that we all look at testing is very different than I think how it's portrayed in the national media and people talking about it. So when I do see a test score at Bucknell, I'm looking at it in a number of contexts, which is, how does it look in the Bucknell applicant pool? So I kind of look at what was for our admitted class, 50% of them scored between here and here. So I kind of use that as a baseline to see, how does this score compare to that based on last year's class? But then we also have national data, so we can see what does the national landscape look like in terms of test scores. It's broken down by race and ethnicity and gender and first generation of college. So all these characteristics that can help us understand what your score means on a national landscape. And then the third is also within your kind of regional and high school context. So sometimes we get information on what's the average testing profile at a high school. And again, let's talk about Gilman for a second. You are at a very, very good school where the testing profile is quite strong. And I think, again, the context is key here, because you as a student might say, my test score isn't good, but what it really means is, my test score isn't good at Gilman, because I am not quite as strong as my peers. But when you take it out of that context and look at it in Bucknell, your perceived bad score could actually be in my top 25% of test scores. Or it could look really good in kind of a regional or national landscape. So that's why I always say the test score nuance is out there and you have to be thoughtful about it. So when I'm looking at a test score, it could be, here's a student whose scores are right in line, this looks good for us. It could be a student who, in their school, it doesn't look quite as strong, but in my pool looks really strong. And then there are students who are in the bottom of my testing profile, but when I look at their high school, they're scoring 300 points higher than their high school. And that's exceptional performance. So as you think about test scores, talk to your counselors and think about, if you're interested in pursuing test optional or test flexible schools, they can help you navigate that and help you figure out, should you be test optional, should you go flexible, or should you actually submit them because they're going to look good at that school?
Thank you. Now, Ms. Gonzalez, will you talk about the role of college essays and recommendations in the process?
Sure, so I'm going to break that separately. The essay specifically, so at Williams and at lots of institutions, we don't have the opportunity to interview all of the applicants that we are bringing into our applicant pool and into the freshman class. And so I look at the essay as a chance for me to have a conversation with a student. That's really what it is. It's you putting your words into writing. So instead of having that conversation face-to-face, we're just having it via computer screen and you typing something. But it's a really great way for us to hear what's important to you. A lot of the application process you've kind of already completed without even actually submitting an application yet at this stage in high school. You already have 2.5 years of grades done and under your belt and courses selected, and by the end of this year, you'll have 3 of them done. You maybe already have a sense halfway through junior year of what teachers you might ask for recommendation letters. You'll start test prep in just a moment, I'm sure, if you haven't yet, and you'll start testing pretty soon too. Those pieces are kind of done, set, sealed, and delivered. But the essay, you still have lots of time and space to work on and to think about what it is that you want to share with us. So that's something that I would encourage you to take a look at your application and see, here are my extracurricular activities that I'm engaged in and involved in. Here are the things that I've studied, that I've been excited about. They already know those things. So what can I tell them beyond that? My favorite part of the application process is reading the college essay. I got to read 50 incredible essays today because they all are really different from one another. You're not going to have the same story as the person sitting next to you. Even if you have same sort of shared experiences as being students at Gilman, you still have different aspects of who you are that you're going to want to share with the admission committee. So take a step back and think about what that might be. I'm also going to go back to my advice to the parents. Parents, I think it can oftentimes be in the essay where you most want to share your opinion and say, that's not a good topic, or I heard you shouldn't do that. And totally get it that you want to chime in there. Give them the space to try it out. Even if they end up realizing like, oh, this idea totally flopped and I don't like it, give them the space to try that essay first, and then they can always rewrite and try a different topic a second time as they're going through the drafts. You're going to have many, many drafts of your college essay, so don't worry about that. And then in terms of recommendations, the recommendations are a really great way for us to see who you are as a student in the classroom. We can't get that just from looking at that transcript. It can give us a sense of what your outcome is on your assessments, but it doesn't give us a sense of the work ethic that you have in the classroom, the way that you discuss coursework with your peers, the way that you lead in classroom discussions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So first, I'll also kind of go back to that point of there are lots of nuances. So definitely, if you are applying to a particular school or a particular program, be sure to see if they have specific requirements for recommendation letters. Occasionally, that is the case, where a specific program or a specific institution might want you to submit a letter from a science teacher or a letter from a mathematics teacher or an engineering program or something along those lines. But otherwise, it's sort of with that advice aside, so assuming that you get free rein on who you choose, think about who knows you best, who can speak to who you are in the classroom, perhaps outside of the classroom too, though that's not really their job. They don't have to tell us about who you are extracurricularly. Great bonus points if we get to hear a little bit about that as well. But your college counselors are going to send us a recommendation letter that gives us a sense of who you are holistically as a person. So your teachers don't have to give us all of those nitty-gritty details. They can just spend the time talking about who you are within their specific class. And especially if you think about, I mentioned earlier tutorial style classes of 2 students and 1 professor. That's what we want to know. How are you going to engage with our faculty? How are you going to engage as a scholar on our college campuses? Are you going to want to have an intellectual conversation with your peers? Those are the things that we're looking for in the recommendation letters as well.
Thank you. So, talking about financial aid, the terms merit aid and need-based aid have been discussed up here. So, Mr. Matheson, in your response here, can you give us some advice that you would offer to families who are considering applying for financial aid, but aren't sure that they will qualify for need-based financial aid?
Sure. So there's some great tools out there which I think are a good place to start. So a few years ago, the federal government required that all of us have a net price calculator on our website. So if you're just curious about what you might receive at our institutions, we're all required by law to have one on our website. So you can fill out information. I will caution you, the estimate is only as good as the information that you put in. And some of the net price calculators can be quite intense. So it can involve having tax returns in front of you and all these things. So if you're estimating everything, it's probably going to be farther off from what we're really going to do than what you've put in. There's also a newer tool that I think only about 50 schools are using. I think you're on. Williams and Bucknell on it. It's called My Intuition. It's a little bit different. It's actually only about 6 questions, so it's pretty quick. But the difference is it doesn't try to give you an exact kind of to the decimal point estimate. What it's doing is giving you a range. So it'll say our best estimate is that you might get this financial aid award. At the low end it's this, and at the high end it's this. So you can get a sense of, you know, how comfortable are you with the lowest financial aid award that you might get from that school. I imagine folks might hope it's always the high one, but it probably is not always going to be that. So those are 2 great options to just get a sense of how financial aid might work for you. What I would say is, when you are applying, and if you're not sure if you qualify for aid, checking the box doesn't hurt. It's about the follow-through. So if you check the box that you're on the application saying, I'm applying for need-based financial aid, what we're really looking at then is, do you follow through and submit the financial aid paperwork, and then can our financial aid teams come up with an estimated package? Because when you pull the curtain back and see what we're doing, if a family doesn't qualify, that's fine with us. It means we're going to ask them for everything. What's more harmful to you in the process is if you don't apply and then ask for money later, because a lot of times schools like mine that have limited budgets don't have money left to give you. So if you say, oh, let's see if I get in and then I'll seek financial aid, I can't tell you the number of families in April that we have to tell them we have no money to give you because we awarded it all to the students who filled out all the paperwork. So my conservative side says, if you're interested, apply and follow through the paperwork to see what happens. Because the worst case scenario is that you don't get anything. And then you know that and we know that. Did I miss part of the question? I went.
No, you talked about need-based financial aid, so that addresses it. Thank you. So for the others, what advice would you offer to families who know that they will need to get financial aid from your institutions to pursue their education at your school? Ms. Gonzalez.
Sure, yeah, so Williams is perhaps in a slightly different place in that all of our financial aid is only need-based. And so it's a pretty straightforward process in terms of financial aid. Either you qualify for need-based aid or you don't. There aren't merit scholarships as part of our admission or financial aid process at Williams. But you know, calculators can be a really great piece. What I'll say from previous institutions where I've worked, deadlines matter big time. So I would really make sure that if you are applying for financial aid, and especially if you're applying for merit scholarships at institutions, not only to sort of asterisk that date in your calendar or in your Google Calendar or whatever it might be, but maybe to even psych yourself out and tell yourself that that deadline is like 3 days before when it really is, because those deadlines really do matter for both the financial aid forms and documentation that's required, as well as for merit scholarship considerations.
And Ms. Gundy, can you talk about your financial aid policies at Maryland?
I think they've done a really good job of covering the things that I think are critically important, particularly related to need-based financial aid. In regard to merit scholarships, one of the things that I encourage you to do is make sure that you're paying attention to the individual institution. I have tons and tons of conversations with families who actually walk in with letters from other schools that show the merit scholarships they've received at other schools and haven't received any or similar merit scholarships from the University of Maryland. It's important that you know that we offer merit scholarships to the students that are the most competitive students in our particular pool of students. So for one school, you may be in the top 25% of the students that they've offered admission to. For another school, you may be right in the middle range of the students that they've offered admission to. We're offering our merit scholarships to the students that are in the tops of our individual classes. So make sure that you understand where you fall in terms of the kinds of students that are being offered admission into that individual school, and that can help you sort of gauge the likelihood that you're going to receive a merit scholarship from that particular institution.
Thank you. So before we open the floor to questions, will each of you share what are some of the most outrageous or most prevalent myths that you've come across in your time working with prospective students and parents? Ms. Gundy, would you like to start?
There's so many. One of the things that I have conversations about often, particularly from families like a school like Gilman, where you are in a very competitive school, I think there's a perception that because you're in a competitive school and you may not have earned the very best grade, if it were the case that you were at a school that wasn't as competitive, you would certainly be the valedictorian of that class. So it's not the case that a B at Gilman is considered equivalent to an A at a public school down the street. It doesn't quite work like that. Like, we're looking for students who are challenging themselves within their own curriculum and doing the best in that curriculum. So we give you a bump in terms of your grade point average just because you went to Gilman. So that's one thing. And the other thing is particularly for a school the size of the University of Maryland, I think that there is a myth that the things that we talk about as being important as a part of our application review process really aren't important, and that somewhere there's just this formula that we're using to determine which students will be offered admission, and that is not the case. There isn't a magic formula. We're going to read your application. We're going to read the transcript. We're going to look at your standardized test scores and consider them in the context of who you are and what opportunities you've had. We're going to read your counselor recommendations. We're going to read your essay and try to get to know you. All of that information is important, so the time that you are putting into that is valuable and appropriate time, because we do take that very seriously.
Ms. Gonzalez, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think probably the line I hear most often is, well, you only admit about 15% of the applicants, so you must always be looking for reasons to deny. That is absolutely incorrect. Every application that I open, I go into thinking, how do I admit this student? How do I make the best case for this student in front of an admission committee of 14? It's a very old school democratic process. You are voted in by a team of 14 admission officers at Williams who are all looking for reasons to include, not to deny. It can feel oftentimes like the admission officer is the gatekeeper who is there to say no. But we're humans too, and we, also relate to the things that you're going through in this process. So more often than not, we'll find moments as we're reading applications where we say, yes, look at this. This is what I'm so excited about. And we're really looking for reasons to include students in our class, not to deny them.
Sure. So I think a myth that I like to debunk is if you keep emailing me or showing up to campus a lot, you'll get in. That's not true. It is going to be based on your application. The other thing is, I like to debunk holistic admission a little bit, because I think a lot of times students or families will feel that holistic admission means we will care more about your engagement outside of the classroom or your essay than we will your academic performance. Remember, as we've talked about, and as your counselor set up, it starts with academic preparation and ability to succeed at our institutions. We're looking at that first and foremost, and then holistic admission is that we're very fortunate to have more academically qualified students than we have space for, so we think about how do we shape our class with those other qualities and characteristics that we bring to the table. So that's where shaping a healthy list comes into play, because it's fine to have some reaches out there, but you can't have the whole list be reaches, because you may be an amazing human being, but if the academics aren't there, you're not going to be successful at really selective schools. So that's the other piece.
That's all wonderful advice. So before we open it up to the floor to questions, please a quick round of applause for her. Let's see if there's a great student that will offer the first question, and then we'll let parents ask some questions.
Parents, you could always sneak your question to your student and have them answer.
Ethan, yes, thank you.
You said that at Williams it's a board of 14 people. How is college admissions done, or how is the process done at other schools?
So for the University of Maryland, your application is read first by an individual admission counselor. In some cases, that person can make the admission decision. Some of them are really easy. Sometimes you read an application and the student is everything that we're looking for. They've taken good classes, they've done well in them, their test scores are good, their counselors say great things about them, the teacher says great things about them, they did an amazing job in the essay. Why wouldn't we offer admission to a student like that? Most of the time, though, it's the case that it's a good student competing among a pool of really good students. So the admission counselor will summarize the information about the student. It's their responsibility to present the student then to the admission committee. And just like at Williams, the student is presented and we vote whether to offer admission.
So at Bucknell, Steph and I were actually talking about this at dinner. We both use team reading as our first read. So two counselors are working together to read the application first. And at Bucknell, they recommend a decision forward. So possible admit, possible deny, and then in early decision, possible defer, in regular decision, possible waitlist. And at that point, my senior leadership team and I will actually start going through those files and starting to shape our class. So what are the things that we're looking for and what do we need and how do we start doing our class that way? And some folks do straight single read systems where there is no committee. I use a little bit of committee, so if my team and I can't make, if my senior leadership team and I can't make a decision individually, sometimes we kick it to a bucket where we can get a group of people together and vote. It's not going to be the same everywhere. If I tried to draw you a flow chart, it would be a bunch of squiggly lines and circles because it's not a linear process, I think, for any of us.
Because every institution is different, right? And so we're all sort of doing things that make sense given the places that we work.
One of the things that we haven't talked an awful lot about in terms of how we're making our decisions is one of the things that can influence decisions aside from the academic information and test scores and what's presented in the application is what we need as an institution. So if it's the case that we have a program that is undersubscribed, we may be looking for students in a particular major one year versus another. You know, if it's the case that we've built a brand new building and we're trying to ramp up that program, it may be the case that we are then looking for students in that particular area. So it's important that you know that some of the things that are completely out of your control, you really don't know what the needs of the individual institution are, and all of us are charged not just with finding the students who have the highest grades and the highest test scores. If that were the case, none of us would have jobs. Our responsibility is to find really strong students who meet the needs of our individual institution that vary from year to year.
All right, any other questions? I'll open the entire floor. Yes, and go ahead.
Listening, you were talking about Williams, sort of the specific elements of each college that make it sort of, appealing to different students. Where would you say the best place is for a student to express their interest in a specific facet of a college as opposed to just in an application towards all colleges in general?
So I'm going to restate some questions just so that everybody can hear. So the question I think was about not just preparing a good college application for all colleges, but to a specific school. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So I'll be honest, for us, that actually doesn't matter. So we don't track demonstrated interest in any way. We're really intentional about not asking students why they're choosing to come to Williams, and we don't offer interviews as part of our process. So we've sort of eliminated those pieces of the application process and admission process at Williams, and some other peer institutions do that too, but it's a very small group of schools that I think do that. So in a lot of places, you will actually be able to sort of customize your application for that individual institution. But at some schools, that doesn't sort of work with our philosophy and our ethos, and so we've opted not to do that.
Same for us.
So at Bucknell, we have one supplemental question, which is we ask you to pick a college to apply to, and if you have an intended major, to also list that. And what I would say is that tends to be the place where students kind of link their interest academically to Bucknell. So I think the students that tend to get my team excited are those that say, I want to major in animal behavior because I heard the dean of admissions at a junior college and I tell me that you have a primate lab. Those types of things are ways that I think for some institutions that you can get at that, and some folks will actually ask that specific question, why this institution as a supplemental question. So if that opportunity presents itself, you should take it seriously. I'd also say in my experience, I feel that most students spend the most amount of time and effort on the main essay and tend to leave the supplementals till the end. And you can definitely see a difference in writing quality sometimes, kind of outcome of it. So the other thing I'll just advise as you enter this process is as you build your list, you should understand who has supplemental questions, because if you're applying to 8 schools and every single one requires an additional supplemental essay, that's actually 8 more short answers or essays you have to do on top of the main one. And if you're leaving that until the night before, that's a lot to be covering. So you want to space those out.
And for those institutions, just a piece of advice, it might actually even be helpful to jot the supplement down on your notebook or have a parent jot it down for you before you go to your campus tour and visit, because it can be really helpful to gather intel for your supplemental essay. Sometimes though the questions are totally unrelated. I know sort of the famous UChicago supplemental essay a few years back was define X. You can't really do that by going on a college tour, right? Like the whole point is how are you engaging with this question, with this material? So also remember that supplemental questions are there in a lot of places, and not speaking for UChicago, but in a lot of other places, to say, you know, why do you want to come to this institution and how are you thinking about it, right? I worked really closely with a family member who was applying to an institution that was a Jesuit institution and had a lot of questions about the faith. And the younger cousin had not prepared at all for those questions. And I thought, you know, this is a good moment for you to think, do I really want to go here? Is this something that I want to think about over the course of my next 4 years? So those supplemental questions might also help guide your search in a lot of ways too.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about ED, EA, and how that affects the process? I feel like it's changed so much since even the last 5 years.
So the question was about early decision and early action and how that's changed over the past couple of years.
Sure. I would say early decision is more prominent than it used to be, and more students are taking advantage of it. I think that if you look at higher education as an industry, our ability to predict the behavior of 17-year-olds has gotten a lot harder. It's a lot more volatile to try to think about how are we going to get our number of students. So I think more and more institutions are leaning on things like early decision, early action, try to get a solid foundation to their class to help stabilize their enrollment moving forward. So it's a good question to ask. I think some folks are more transparent than others. I'm very transparent at Bucknell. We enroll about 35 to 37% of our class through early decision 1. We aim for another 10% in early decision 2. And that alone is almost 50% of my incoming class. And when you look at our applicant numbers, that means that in early decision, we're admitting about 70%. In ED2, it's about 50%, and then in regular, it's under 30%. So I always am very honest with those numbers, and in my heart of hearts, I really hope that students who are applying to early decision really want to be at my institution, but I also think it's fair for you to just know the statistics. Not everybody will be that transparent with you. Some will dance around a little bit. They'll give you some insight, but not all of it. But I think that's why early programs have become more popular, is that folks are trying to just stabilize their college enrollments in any way that they can.
Before we move on to the other ones, early decision is a binding commitment that the student and the family makes to attend that school if they're admitted. Ms. Gundy, you want to talk about Maryland's early action or priority?
So we have a November 1st application deadline that is considered early action. The difference between early action and early decision is that you are not bound to attend the University of Maryland. It's simply an opportunity for you to apply and receive your admission decision early on. So our application deadline is November 1st. We promise that we will release our admission decisions by February 1st. One of the things that is really important to know about the University of Maryland, and that may differ between institutions, but for the University of Maryland, our priority deadline, or our early action deadline, is critically important. If the University of Maryland is one of the schools to which you are planning to apply, you have to meet that November 1st deadline. We will admit about 90% of our class out of the pool of students who applied by that November 1st deadline. We will fill almost completely our living and learning programs, like Honors College or College Park Scholars, out of the pool of students who apply by November 1st. The vast majority, if not all, of our merit scholarship consideration is given to students who apply by that November 1st priority deadline. So you get your admission decision earlier. However, you don't have to confirm your intention to enroll any earlier than the May 1st enrollment confirmation deadline. So there really is no disadvantage to applying by that deadline, but there are some very significant advantages to applying by that early deadline.
I think they've covered really all that I would have said, so the only thing I'll say is don't stress yet. If you're not sure, if you're like, I haven't even really done a lot of college tours yet, don't stress. It's really early in the process to be worrying about where or if you're going to apply ED. It's sort of a family conversation to have. If it's early decision and it's binding, early action, as Ms. Gundy just said, super easy to just do it. And then the other thing is that that's why this team is here, right? You're not going to make these decisions uninformed or on your own. They are experts at their jobs. Use them wisely.
Yes, question here.
Would you say legacy plays any role in the mission?
So the question is about legacy and the role it plays in the application.
I can start. So that's going to depend institution to institution. I think you may have seen a little bit of media press recently about some institutions talking about their decline in legacy admissions. At Williams, it tends to be about 10% of the freshman class that is admitted as a legacy applicant. Varies year to year, but around there. And you know, that's one constituent that we're considering as an applicant to our institution. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense that if your parents went to a particular institution, that you might be excited about that place if they've been talking to you about it for 17 years, right? So it makes a lot of sense that students who have had parents who have attended the institution would be enthusiastic about attending the institution as well. But there's no sort of thumb on the scale or weight in the advantage process of the in the admission process for legacy applicants.
For the University of Maryland, legacy status is not one of the factors that are considered as a part of our application review process. We're such a large state university that so many of our applicants are children of alums of the university, so that we realistically can't consider that as a part of our application review process. One of the things that might be helpful for you to do if you're interested, you can go to our website and you can actually find our application review factors and see there are more than 24 things that could potentially influence an admission outcome. Might be helpful for you to take a look at that.
It's really cool. I've seen it before. It's like super transparent. Nobody else is doing it.
I think it's important to know that legacy is defined differently in each institution. So out of the 3 I've worked for, I have one where legacy was defined as grandparent, parent, sibling, step-parents, and step-siblings. So it was very broad. Another institution, they only considered a parent of the undergraduate college a legacy. So if a parent went somewhere else and did grad school at the institution I worked for, that didn't count. And at Bucknell, I currently work, we define legacy as parent or grandparent. So that's the other thing too, is it depends on the definition of how folks consider it. What I would say at Bucknell is that there's no inherent advantage to legacy applicants, but what we do is we tend to look at them one extra time in our process just to make sure, as we look over decisions, are we comfortable with the decisions that we've made? Because frankly, we know that usually our alumni are the ones that are most likely to call if they're upset with the decision. So we just want to double check ourselves to make sure we can talk about the decision and the decision that we made. I was going to say something else. Just thought I read.
Yes.
For kids that know what they want to major in versus kids that, like myself, when I was going undergrad, that had no idea, is there an advantage to knowing what you want to major in, or is it all pretty equal? I thought I'd heard that if you're applying to the business school, your odds of getting in might not be as good as if you were just applying to either a different school or no school at all.
So the question is about the advantage or disadvantage of applying with a specific major in mind.
For the University of Maryland, we are reviewing you for admission to the university, and your interest in one major over another does not influence the admission outcome. However, there are a few majors at the university that are considered limited enrollment majors. So we will, if you're applying for a limited enrollment major, like business, for example, is limited enrollment, engineering, there are other areas. We will review you first for admission to the university without consideration of the major. And if we determine that we want to offer admission, we will then see what the student is interested in majoring in. And if it's one of the limited enrollment programs, we'll look to see whether they're meeting the criteria for admission into that program. If they are, they're admitted to the university and admitted directly into that program. If they are not, they're still admitted to the university, but they're admitted into letters and sciences, and there they can work to gain actual admission into that program. So choice of major does not influence admission outcomes.
So it is a little different at Bucknell because of the policies we have in place. So undecided is an option all three of our colleges, but students do have to pick a direction. So arts and sciences, engineering, or management. And the reason it matters for us is that our management programs are so popular that you have to be accepted as a your first application to Bucknell, you have to be accepted into Freeman College of Management. If you start in arts and sciences or engineering, you cannot major in management at Bucknell. So it does matter how students apply. And then what my team is also really honest about is engineering is very attractive at Bucknell. So we also highly recommend students interested in engineering start in that college, because if they change their mind after their first semester, first year, arts and sciences will welcome them. But to start as a second semester, first year, or sophomore, it's going to delay graduation and kind of hinder their progress in a timely fashion. So for places like mine, it's really important to be looking at our policies and the application by college. So again, that's going to be a nuanced question for the schools that your students are looking at.
Sorry, I should probably answer. So I will just also say, beyond that, there might also be particular courses within your required classes that you might have needed to take in order to continue into a particular program. So at a previous institution, for example, you were not admitted into the College of Engineering without having taken calculus and physics. You were not admitted into the College of Business without having taken calculus. So those are just some things to think about and have conversations with your college counseling staff as well. At Williams, we do not admit to a particular major or program. You're admitted to the college. You then explore across the 60 majors. You don't declare your major until the end of your sophomore year. So you actually have 2 years of full exploration before you're declaring.
Yes, question in the back.
For applicants who are twins, do you look at them individually, or would you ever admit those or just reject those? How do you handle that?
Your question was about twins.
It's a really good question. And it's actually one that comes up a lot. So you are perhaps twins in the way that everybody has seen you up until this point, but as applicants to the college, you are individual people. So you will be reviewed separately, decisions are made separately. Sometimes everybody gets happy news, sometimes nobody gets happy news, right? It's totally independent of each individual student. Triplets, the same thing. Quadruplets, the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Not true for college obligated to inform students of the criteria that meets an eligible for a certain course or a certain major, and if so, how would a student not our students able to know if
So the question is about what requirements a school might have and how do they publicize those requirements to that particular major? Thank you.
So usually you can check out the admission website as a first starting point, right? And most often than not, you should be able to find information on the admission website. If not, call, email, send something.
Our websites are your best friends.
Yeah.
Or ask your college counselor.
Yeah.
Last question, yes.
How do you feel about, or how are gap years evaluated or looked at? Are you more interested in programs that kids can do, traveling, volunteering in an orphanage? Would you rather see them working? Is it something that can impact their admission decision? Would you want them to apply and then take the year, or take the year and then apply?
The question was about gap years and whether or not your school looks at them favorably and what particular programs might be helpful or not helpful when you're on that gap year.
I think that's one of those questions that you really need to ask of the individual colleges that you're interested in. For the University of Maryland, we have seen an increase, a slight increase in the number of students that are choosing to take a gap year. We encourage students to apply for admission, and then we will ask them if they're admitted, to confirm their intention to enroll, and then they apply for a deferral of their admission for the following year. We are interested in seeing students doing something, like we don't really prescribe what kinds of activities students should be involved in, but we expect that they are involved in a formal educational type opportunity. We don't, like I had one student who really just wanted to rest for a year. That wasn't a deferral that we were in favor of.
I would agree. I would say if students are thinking about gap year, I also encourage applying during the senior year of high school, because I think your counselors are here, it's easier to get the paperwork, and then you request the deferment if you're admitted and intend to enroll. Our policy at Bucknell is that I pretty much grant deferrals. Our only stipulation is that you can't matriculate and enroll full-time in another institution. That's our one rule that we have. I think for some students they're really beneficial and helpful. In terms of one more than the other, no, for me, I think it's just really what the student wants to do. Because I've seen it a couple ways. Some students have deferred so they can work and make a little bit of money to help offset the cost of education, service work, educational programs. We had one student last year who asked for deferral because he is training to try to make the Olympics this summer in kayaking. I was happy to get that one. I think that would be pretty neat.
Our policy is the same as Bucknell's. You simply request after being admitted and choosing to enroll. And I'll just say from a personal perspective, I think gap years can be a really great time for students to still be engaged in something, but to have a little bit of breathing room from that sort of core, rigorous academic life. It gives you a lot of perspective to come back to college with. So certainly a fan of a gap year.
Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Gundy, Mr. Mathis, thank you again. Let's hear it for our guests.